Vince Vaughn currently starring in Hacksaw Ridge, which is out in theaters right now. I had not dreamed of you being in a World War II movie. How did they come to you for the role?
Yeah, it was Mel came to me for the movie, and I had known him for a while, and I guess the producer Bill Mechanic said that he thought of me for the part. So as soon as I read the script, I thought it was very original. I'd never seen a World War II movie that with the focus on someone like Desmond. So it really kind of affects you in that. It's not an idea that's a good idea that's been executed very well many times. It was sort of unique. So I think it was all the more of a surprising of a read. And I was just really moved by the story. The Desmond's personal journey was very powerful to me. And then, after reading the screenplay and being affected by it, I did some research. There was a documentary on him that was quite interesting, and I did a little bit of reading and was just very taken by his experience.
And your character of Howell, tell us who this guy is.
Well, he was based on a couple different people. Was not one person, but I have military in my family, and over the years, I've always done a lot with the USO, and so I've known a lot of military guys, and it's his job as the sergeant to prepare these guys for war. For the worst of circumstances, and this case particularly, they're actually going to go, and he will be with them. So it's really life or death. So I think that there is a lot of love for these kids. There's a big responsibility in preparing them and wanting to get that process correct, and really making sure that at the end of it, you get them to a place where they can stay alive and keep each other alive. And so there's sort of a testing of them, a breaking down of them. But as the process goes on, there's a real camaraderie and love there, and connection that's very unique between human beings going into a circumstance like that. So I was very well, then approached it very much as an individual, kind of a backstory and specifics for my character. The occupation is one that has its, expectations and obligations, but then you want to be, a unique person within those parameters.
And as you say, I mean, he's not being harsh on them, just like another drill sergeant, in say non-war times. He has to have these kids ready for battle because they may be saving his life.
That's right, and it's also I kind of made a choice, and the writing was very good. That there's those moments early, even with Desmond, where he kind of laughs, and I kind of allow it. I sort of call him on it some, but I also have that twinkle where you kind of like this kid, right? He's trying hard and he's got a gleam about him. So it's like you said, it's wartime, so the stakes are high. So you really want to get their focus right. You want them to do things correctly. You want to kind of, break down or, punish the behavior that won't be fitting, but you want to reward stuff that you think will be fitting. And I think there's a nice kind of thing naturally with what Andrew brings to the table is in that character. There's a real dignity and warmth to him that you kind of, it's easy when you're doing those scenes to kind of be charmed by. So I felt that when the distinction became clear that he was going to make an odd choice and one that did not appear to be a good fit for what we were doing, there's a little bit more of a betrayal there because there was a little bit of a unique bond that was formed in those first couple scenes.
The first time we meet your character as an audience, I talked to Andrew Garfield a couple of weeks ago in an interview, and he said you just had everybody rolling in stitches. You think they could hardly even shoot. You had them laughing so much.
Yeah, there was a good combination. I really tried to, the person who was being interrogated, you want to kind of put it at odds, but, kind of do it in a way that maybe is endearing and rallying some camaraderie. So you get to be, depending on the purpose of it, there's times you're wanting to really kind of get their attention or scare them, or motivate them. And there's times you are intentionally looking to be kind of funny, sort of a skill set. The writing was leaned that way. Mel definitely encouraged that, which was a great lessons for me and just working with him, especially in this kind of a format, just on tone and, how not to approach things so importantly, meaning, obviously you play the stakes are real and you know what's at stake in the context of the scenes. But that being said, you still allow for some levity or humanity that would come in, not be so try hard. I would say in all those moments.
Yeah, I know the script was great, but can any of that be attributed to you?
Well, no, the script was tremendous. There was some improvisation. There was a few lines. I'll tell you one thing interesting: the scene in the barracks where I come in that morning and he's been beaten by his fellow soldiers. Mel had called me the night before and said, I think we can do better than what's on the page here. We knew the intention of the scene was he was going to stay committed, and this was not going to dissuade him from both wanting to serve and not carry a weapon. So Mel sort of engaged me and Andrew in talking about possibilities for what the scene could be. And it was something that we kind of wrote together, the three of us, through the course of that evening, and then early the next morning on set. We kind of finished, and it's a very effective scene. And the intentions were always there and clear, but it was one of those things where I think Mel's instinct to maybe kind of take upon what was sort of organically being built through these specifics of me and Andrew playing the parts, and kind of seeing if we could find a way that felt honest into that transition was quite effective. And he has really good instincts, Mel, I think, for what's believable in human nature. And so you could kind of throw ideas out and he would, either accept them or say, no, that one doesn't quite make sense to me. So that was an example where there was some kind of reworking of the scene with all three of us included.
Him being a former actor, and you had all kinds of directors in your career, how is that different for you? A former actor, an Oscar-winning director too. It's not just like this is his first film. But how's that different for you from an acting standpoint?
I would suppose, and I've seen it, that actors can at least be empathetic with your position in having to act. So there is usually better communication, just in understanding what the process is. But Mel's unique into that I think he just, he has a real energy about him that's very supportive. He can be very funny, but there's a great strength to him that also is, very contagious. There's a conviction that he has, in combination, I think, with the sense of humor. And he was very good at kind of, finding ways of saying things that could stick with you, without getting you in your head to try to drive towards a result, even if that's what he was looking for. He was good at kind of leading you towards that. And then he was, if things were going well and he was liking it, he wasn't shy to let you know. He would laugh. He would be very encouraging with things. And then, sometimes if something wasn't working, he'd kind of be thinking about it and maybe lead you to sort of finding, an answer for it. But the combination of his, understanding of human nature, along with the visuals and also the camera, but that being done in a way that felt very complimentary. It's always terrific on sets as when you have a real camaraderie between departments. I find that those are the best experiences and when everyone's working together. So there becomes a rhythm and pace that's really set by the director, where there's an understanding that the camera is kind of figuring out what it's going to do in the scene and the actors are. And when that's in symphony and, you're not stepping on each other during those processes, but you're complimenting each other, I think that was another great quality he had. Those, some of those scenes we did were oneers. And we would kind of just walk through, and I was, very, angry or frustrated, upset in some of those scenes. So I was less able to, be as hitting my marks in as direct way. I had the freedom to kind of allow myself to be taken over by what I was feeling. So there was just a nice rapport as far as walking through and understanding that I felt very good for everyone, that we were all able to understand our process in a way that was, again, really, in unison, not in conflict of departments.
For folks that haven't seen it, the first half of the movie, we meet Desmond, he goes through training, but then that second half of the movie, that's as vivid war scenes that we've ever seen probably on a film screen. What was it like shooting those?
I really marveled at Mel in that it was really an independent movie. There was not a large budget for the film, and the production design is quite excellent in the movie, but it was very limited. The actual battle was maybe 150 yards. It feels like this vast uh, terrain, but it was actually a very condensed area that they just picked angles. Mel picked very interesting angles, and that was a challenge every day for where we would set sequences. And when you see the movie, you would never detect that, but he was quite limited. And again, there was 360 degrees. The views were of farmhouses. It was in a dairy farm in Australia. So you couldn't really shoot and see the background. And then within that, we would do a lot of practical stuff. So you would have a lot of moving parts. The first AD was very good. His name is Mick, the stunt coordinator, kind of second unit for Mel. He was terrific. They've worked together quite a bit. But these were kind of very choreographed things with sometimes, hundreds of people involved, where you would go through a sequence with explosions, practical explosions, and everyone was really focused and committed to doing your part of it. So that brought, I think, a level of focus and intensity because, once you kind of were set to go, you didn't want to mess it up. You obviously wanted to make sure you were doing your part correctly. So I think there's a intensity and focus within those scenes based on wanting to do your part correctly because it was a domino thing. And then the one thing I really thought that Mel did terrific was when the war is supposed to be a blur, it's kind of a blur and that you're not sure what's happening. But for the most part, as an audience member, I was surprised in seeing it just how aware we were of what was happening, what the objective was in each sequence, who the guys were, where they are. It's not an easy thing to accomplish. So when we're shooting it, it can feel very chaotic. But as he put it together, I think the narrative of it, I think, holds you in battle because you're not confused by what's going on or what they're attempting to do.
And Andrew Garfield, this, I think his best performance ever, and he's really reaping the rewards with Golden Globe and SAG nominations, hopefully an Oscar nomination. What was he like to work with one-on-one for you?
Yeah, I think well-deserved for Andrew, too. He's terrific. He was very committed to the role, but not in a way that was a burden on anybody. He was very easy and fun to be around. We had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, we would have our moments and pick our shots, obviously, but it's a long duration, especially the physical stuff when you start getting into the execution of battle. So he was very good at, really staying in it, but also being able to have levity within moments and then really being able to dial in. I think it was very effective in not burning out, meaning maintaining one level of intensity the whole time. But he stayed in accent the whole time without it feeling burdensome that you would forget about it. You were unaware that he was ultimately, and we would go out. We would hang out on the weekends, and he was with an accent, but very much himself, and not a labored thing. And I think what I really marvel at what Andrew does in the film is, there's such an innocence in this boy that's very transparent in a visceral way in the relationship side of the dating stuff with Teresa Palmer, who I think is great in the film. There's a real innocence and joy and naiveness that he has in that relationship. And then ultimately in the battle, there's a real strength. There's a real conviction and power that's very, very formidable without it being forced across the screen, without him showing it, with it really, truly existing within him. And I thought that was tremendous. I think he does a very nice job of being connected and feeling these moments, being present in the right way in these moments, in a way that feels very truthful. And also carry, I think, which was true from Desmond and washing the stuff on him, without an arrogance, with the humility and an accessibility. So it was a truly very unique, very powerful performance.
Yeah, I thought what you said is true, and I think it's a tightrope kind of performance because you have to be all the things you said, but also just that likability. The audience really has to want to follow somebody that they're going to see on screen and root for the entire movie. I don't think he's hardly ever out of frame.
Yeah, and he did it too without it feeling. It felt like a very dimensional person. It didn't feel like a a broad interpretation of this man, which I thought made it all the more captivating. It felt very specific. It felt like a very rounded person, and I think what he did physically was outstanding. And I think what he does, just being present and feeling and responding within scenes was terrific as well.
You mentioned the leader of the group earlier, but your whole stunt team is nominated for SAG Awards Stunt Ensemble. That probably made all of you feel very good about that.
Yeah, well deserved. Those guys were awesome. I mean, they were so committed. It made the acting within those parameters, that kind of believability around you, made it very easy. But these guys were, taking falls and really going for it. And there was no kind of phoning it in. And they operated on a very, very high level. And obviously a lot of those battle sequences that are so powerful and impacting, of course, the visuals and all of those things play a component. But if you, as you watch the movie, I think there's a real present and committedness by all the people involved. And that's a real compliment, I think, to all the stunt guys that were involved. They all really, sold those moments, those shots or movements. They did a tremendous job.
Hacksaw Ridge also nominated at the Globes for Best Film Drama. It very well could be up for Best Picture at the Oscars. By the way, will you be going to the Globes? Well, I guess usually most of the cast of these movies go like all together. Is that something you're planning on doing?
Yeah, something we've talked about. So yes, I think I'll attend and be there with everybody.
Oh, that'll be a fun night. You've been to the Globes. You know how much of a party that is.
Yeah, it's true.
In terms of one other Mel Gibson question, you and I both have been watching him forever. A favorite Mel Gibson movie from the past?
So hard to say because they've all kind of impacted. That Apocalypto really blew me away. I just thought that was very pioneering. I hadn't seen something quite like that. I thought it was so powerful, and I hadn't quite seen anything quite run like that, just with what he did with the language and sequences, and it was very powerful. Of course, Braveheart was great and Passions was great. He's made some, tremendous movies. But just off the top of my head in this moment, I would say Apocalypto really was quite remarkable. How about yourself?
Oh, well, from a director, I mean, I think I'd go along with the Academy and go Braveheart.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also thinking about his acting career, and I mean, nobody was hotter in the 80s, and especially doing buddy movies, especially something like Lethal Weapon. I mean, you've done them. I mean, that's very hard to get that chemistry right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got he's a tremendous actor. I think he's very vulnerable and funny, and strong as well. So he's interesting. Definitely interesting within watching him as an actor. He's very, very engaging.
In terms of the Oscars, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned to me before we started, because I asked, usually when we get to this point in an interview, if I've got an Oscar voter on, I always ask about just your voting style. You get to vote you get to nominate in the acting categories.
Yes.
And then Best Picture. When you're nominating or ultimately voting on an acting award, what kind of stuff's going through your mind? What kind of performances generally trigger you to want to vote for them?
I don't know that I have a formal criteria. I think I'm probably like other voters in that you sort of sit with things and you see how they resonate with you. Sometimes things will kind of keep coming up, or moments will kind of stay with you that impact you. So it's not necessarily the kind of thing. It's sometimes going to be a very difficult choice. The whole nature of it is very challenging. Obviously, at some point you have a lot of very good work, and you're trying to evaluate what is your favorite, and that's something that can change. Even within the course of a year, day to day. So I don't know that I have a formal kind of vetting process, but yeah, you try to watch everything. I think if you're gonna vote, you try to make sure that you give everything a chance to watch, and it's always exciting to see any of the performances, or technical side, or the actual movie. Anything that's kind of interesting or different or well done is always, very powerful. It's always inspiring to see those things. And I think there's a few of them this year, which have been very good.
So more than anything, if something is staying with you over time after you've watched it and not just the immediate reaction, that's what appeals to you the most.
Yes, I think I'd sort of wait and see more. If I had to say anything, is sort of what kind of keeps coming up.
Hmm.
It's always better if you can kind of get ahead of it and watch stuff too.
Yeah, the people that wait till, I can't imagine the voters that are watching, 40 movies over this 2 week holiday period. I think like most people, I try to watch them over time.
And that can be challenging just with life or families and that stuff.
Mhm.
Sometimes that can be challenging. So yeah, it's better if you have a little space between them, but it's not always the case.
No, it's not.
You have some kind of formal criteria that you go through, or is it the same? Or are you similar?
Well, we have our team, when we finish, we'll see a screening or something, and the immediate reaction doesn't necessarily be, it's not necessarily the reaction you have, say, a week later or 2 weeks later.
Mhm.
And I always tell them we'll walk out, and especially one member of my team who will be watching this later, I'm sure, he'll always say, that's the best movie I've ever seen, or that movie was horrible. I say, give it like 3 or 4 days and see if you still even remember it.
Let it marinate. Well, he's
let it marinate.
enthusiastic in the moment. That's good.
How about just not to single out anybody from this year, obviously, because you're voting, or even maybe last year, but think back to your past, just a couple of performances that really, even maybe made you want to be an actor, or that just really you adored.
Oh, God, there's so many of them. I always liked Robert Duvall quite a bit. I loved him in Tender Mercies, was a great performance. Of course, he's great in everything. I think
The Apostle, I think that was so underrated.
Yeah, he's tremendous. And Hackman as well, I think, is very, very good that way. I always like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And that movie in general really spoke to me younger. I like that film a lot. But there's so many great movies and performances. Patricia Neal, I always liked her performance. And I like Facing the Crowd. She was great in that. O'Neill, and she was very good in HUD as well. I think like a lot of actors, a lot of those movies speak to you, and you watch different stuff. But it's hard to single out any performances, just one more than the other. But as you're asking me in this moment, that's sort of what came to my head.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those were performances that I enjoyed.
Well, as I told you the night we met 3 or 4 weeks ago at a party, I think this is your best performance you've ever given. And new ones and some very funny ones. This might send you in a whole different direction in your career, where you're going to be offered things you haven't been offered before.
Yeah, it was nice. I like the character was a great character to play and had some good range and stuff to it, and also getting a chance to work with Mel in this type of subject matter. It's nice to be in a movie that's really about something. That was a lot of fun. But I've been fortunate. I've had a lot of fun giving performances and doing things, and this was definitely something different for me, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, just a great experience all around.
Well, I hope the Oscar voters, such as yourself, will take notice, and maybe we'll see you on some of these red carpets coming up.
Look forward to it. Such a pleasure. Nice talking to you.